Hello and welcome to this special edition of the Jack's Throwback Attack podcast. Well, I'm pleased to have with me on the podcast today writer, producer, voiceover and actor Steve Ryde. Hello there.
Hello.
How are you today?
A long list. Yes, I'm all right, thank you. Yes, I'm okay.
Fantastic stuff.
Yeah, hoping that things calm down a bit in the east and COVID numbers reduce. But apart from that, it's all good.
Indeed. Well, thank you for agreeing to take part in the show. It's great to have you on. I've got lots of stuff to ask about your career in children's television. So I'm going to start right at the beginning. I understand that your beginnings were in the 1980s and you acted in a few children's shows on children's ITV. Is that right?
That's right, yes. I was a member of the Central Junior Television Workshop, which... Central being Central Television, which they set up in Nottingham. And I joined that when I was 14 years old, which is a very long time ago, and auditioned for various producers and directors that came down to see us for various kids shows, and got a part in Your Mother Wouldn't Like It, which was the first TV show I appeared in. I actually appeared in an earlier series as an extra, and was very excited, as were all the others who were appearing for the first time as extras, and actually getting to visit the studios at Lenton Lane for the first time. And we had a dressing room of our own, and that was incredible. And we were paid for the day. We were paid, I think it was £25, which at the age of 14 in 1985 was it was a king's ransom. It was fantastic money. So that's where it all started. Your Mother Wouldn't Like It, which was already a BAFTA award-winning kids show. Series 2, I think, won the BAFTA, and we joined Series 3. And did that for a couple of series. That of course, evolved into Palace Hill, in which I played Jimmy, the Time Warp Kid, for a couple of series, the 1940s throwback. So that's where it all began.
Good stuff. And they were comedy shows. Now, did that kickstart your interest in wanting to produce comedy yourself in the future?
I think comedy and entertainment were always in my blood, really. I've never really had any ambitions towards anything that was in any way vaguely educational or nutritional or worthwhile. When we did our sessions at the workshop, we did our improvs and our drama exercises, I would usually skew it in a comedy, irreverent and often annoying way that the person running the class wasn't necessarily that pleased about. So yes, it was always, my interest always lay in comedy, I would say.
Your Mother Wouldn't Like It, as you can probably tell, was a bit before my time, but I have seen clips and I've got friends who are huge fans of the show. But am I right in thinking it was quite an anarchic show?
It was, yeah, for its time. I mean, it spoofed a lot of the contemporary TV shows that kids, the older kids would have been watching at that time. Palace Hill, of course, was a spoof of Grange Hill, really, just with the addition of the royal princes, William and Harry, when they were small children. It was lots of sketches, and we take the mickey out of groups like Five Star, and I did a pretty poor impression, I think, of Tommy Cannon, as part of Cannon and Ball, and we were the hosts of that particular episode. So lots of impressions of varying degrees of quality, and spoofs of shows from the 80s.
Good stuff. Well, so going on from that then, so that was in the mid to late 80s, early 90s, if I'm correct. Is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be about 85, 86, I think. Yeah.
Okay. And then how did you go from doing that to landing the position of doing voiceovers on CITV? Because in 1993, they dropped the in-vision continuity and brought in out-vision, and you were the person that voiced pretty much everything on there for many years.
That's right. Yeah, I was there for 5 years. I was very fortunate. Yeah, it was an audition, and again, I heard about it through the workshop, which was run at the time by Ian Smith, who's been responsible for many far greater careers than mine, but certainly played a big part in my career. And I went along to Birmingham to the old studios and met a producer called Jude Hartley and Denise Winterburn, who were running presentation for the network, for CITV, and did a couple of test promos and a couple of live links, and yeah, I got the job. And that was a big turning point, really, because I learned so much, being live every day, and the process of creating trailers and short bits of TV, little interstitials, as we called them, little sketches, and other various pieces of kit that would slot into all those afternoon. So I'm sure a lot of your listeners know those links in the afternoon, 5 days a week, and they were all most of those broadcasts were live. So obviously the trailer, the promos were pre-recorded, but everything else was live. And that was it was a fantastic experience. Yeah, that was from 93 through to 98.
Yeah,
I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah. And prior to that, had you always had like a talent for doing voices? Because you did do many different voices on those links.
Thank you. That's very kind. Yeah, I mean, I did a bit. I mean, as an actor, when I was doing the acting, the starting point for me would often be the voice of a character, and I felt that once I'd found a voice, that I could build everything else around that, really, and I felt comfortable. Yeah, and I always loved radio comedy and Kenny Everett and all of that sort of stuff. So, and I could, at the time, I could do a couple of impressions reasonably well. So yeah, it was something I felt quite comfortable with, really, and I've always loved radio and as a medium. And I remember making my own little sort of radio shows with a cassette, tape-to-tape deck, back in the early 80s, and trying to put. I don't know if you remember, Amstrad brought out I think it was called the Studio 100, which was a hi-fi system that you could buy, but it had lots of little knobs and faders, and you could plug 4 microphones into it. And that was, for me at that age, it was a dream come true. I could afford to buy one because I'd done a bit of TV work, so I had the 150 quid to go and buy one of these Amstrad Studio 100, Studio 500, something like that. If you Google it, I'm sure it would pop up. Yeah, it would make little comedy radio shows my own amusement, and hopefully that of my friends in my bedroom. So yeah, that was certainly a job. It was a fantastic job for me, and the people were great. I got to write a lot of my own stuff. In fact, the live links I wrote myself. And it was a fabulous introduction to TV production as well.
Mm-hmm. It must have been quite a full-on job, because I imagine you probably would have had to have watched a lot of the programmes to know what to say. And then not only that, you appeared in so many of the promos, and sometimes you're actually on location on the programmes for the adverts. So you must have been quite busy for those 5 years.
It was, yeah. It was certainly a full-time job, but as I say, absolutely brilliant experience, and I loved the shows. Great programs. Everything from Pat Sharp's Fun House to the Raggy Dolls to lots of Scooby Doo, of course. Back then, what else was there? Oh, Sooty. I've always loved Sooty. Matthew Corbett, particularly, I thought was fantastic. So yeah, I was in my element, really. and who else got paid to watch cartoons and great kid shows for a living, and then talk about them a little bit for an hour and a half every afternoon, and then go home. It was great experience, and I got to meet a lot of the celebrities, idols from that time, which was the how-to lots, Gaz Top,
yeah,
and who else? Pat Sharp, of course, from Funhouse. Hugo Myatt from Nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was it was great. Yeah, they were great days. And I love the city of Birmingham as well. I moved to Birmingham from my hometown of Sutton-in-Ashfield in Nottinghamshire, and I loved it. I spent my 20s in Birmingham, and I miss it still. It was great. It's a great city. It really is.
Indeed it is, although I might be a bit biased in saying that.
Yeah. And the Black Country.
Yes.
My first serious girlfriend was from Hales Owen.
Okay.
Many years, so I've got a lot of affection for the Black Country.
Fabulous stuff. Well, yes, it is a great area, but again, I might be biased there. At the time of when you were doing CITV in Birmingham, at the same time you also appeared in one of its programmes, Wizadora. You were Tatty Bogle, the Scarecrow. What was it like doing that show?
It was great. It really was. I took over from the wonderful Joe Greco, who played Tatty Bogle in the first 2 series, I think it was. And it came about because David Crozier, who I'd worked with on Palace Hill, was the director of Wizadora, and he called me one day and obviously thought I'd make a pretty good Scarecrow, and asked me if I'd be able to do the job. And I managed to arrange it with good folk at CITV that I could take my leave for my annual leave for the 4 or 5 weeks I would need to go and shoot Wizadora down in it was New Malden, actually, the first place at Fountain Studios. And I went down, and I still had Joe's costume. It was a little bit shorter than me, I think, so the trousers only came up to the middle of my shins, or came down there. And it was great fun. I remember having sheafs of wheat glued to my eyebrows, which were quite painful to remove, and took most of my eyebrow hair with it. With Lizzie and Wendy van der Plank, of course, who was the original Wizadora. Lizzie McPhee took over from her for a later series. And the brilliant Brian Murphy, who I knew growing up as George from George and Mildred, obviously a great actor who'd done many, many other things. And he and I were actually very close. We had a great friendship, and it was lovely to invite him many years later to come and be a guest actor on The Slammer. Yeah. Up at 3 Mills, and he did as I knew he would and always does, a fantastic turn for us as the world's worst ventriloquist. It was wonderful. We did I think it was 4 series of Wizadora, and it was just tremendous fun with a great group of people. I know this all sounds very very schmaltzy, but actually it's true. You do tend to get nice people working in kids' TV generally, and I've got very, very happy memories of those days.
That's good to hear. I mean, going back to the costume, because there was a lot of straw sticking out of it, was it uncomfortable to wear? Because that would irritate me, I would have to say.
Yeah, I think it was a mixture of sort of that raffia stuff and some real straw. The stuff, the sheafs they glued to my eyebrows were real, but it wasn't particularly. The wig was very itchy, actually, now you come to mention it, and that had to be sort of pinned in with hair grips, which stuck into my scalp, and that was the most. The costume itself was fine, but the wig, that straw wig, was a bit of a pain. I think I earned my money with that just by wearing that.
Was it surreal? Because obviously you would be presenting CITV, and then you'd have to watch yourself back every week watching Wizadora when it was on.
Yeah, I've never been a big fan of watching myself back. I probably won't listen to this podcast, Jack, to be honest with you. I sort of I found something else to do during the 10, 15 minutes that Wizadora was on. We're getting ready for the next show. It's probably Tots TV or Thomas the Tank Engine, something like that.
Absolutely. I mean, as you probably know, in the days of YouTube, lots of people have dug out their VHS tapes and like to upload episodes of Wizadora or CITV continuity. How do you feel about that? Do you ever sometimes be tempted just to have a look and see what you said 25, 30 years ago or whatnot?
It's so easy to do. I have done it. I've not done it for a very long time, but I have done it, and it just takes you right back, because this was my everyday from the age of 21. I was when I started at CITV through till I was 26, I think 26, 27, when I moved on to producing it, which is another story, and. Yeah, sometimes I wince. Sometimes I think, oh, that was all right. Or, it's on the whole, it was good. I mean, it must have been okay because we did it for 5 years.
Yeah.
So it can't have been that bad. But yeah, when you're broadcasting live 5 days a week, pretty much 52 weeks a year, there's going to be a mixed bag, shall we say?
Certainly. I mean, there was a time, I'd say maybe a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, where I was responsible for posting a clip on Twitter and tagging you in it, and I seem to remember your response was just purely "Oh God," because it was a promo for Funhouse. And in the promo, you put on a wetsuit, and then you have green gunge dumped on you. And you say, like, "Pat Sharp, I'm ready for you now." And then all this green gunge pours all over you. I'm sure that was probably cringy to watch.
We had some great promo directors work at CITV. A chap called Tony Jopia, who makes horror films now.
Okay.
Actually, I think, and but still makes promos as well. And a chap called Tony Trafford, and they would come sometimes with some very sort of avant-garde ideas for trailers for various shows. And I remember that being one. There's some other really surreal, because I did trailers as well, and occasional voices for shows outside of CITV for Central Television, for that region, and for some network promos that Central made for the network. And yes, some of them were really quite odd. I remember there was one where I had to wear a Velcro suit, and somebody was throwing Velcro balls which were sticking to my head. And I think that was supposed to represent ideas coming to me to promo a quiz show. I can't even remember what it was for. I can't remember what it was for. But it was great that we were able to be so experimental. That Funhouse promo. I think there was a great desire to find new and interesting ways of promoting the shows. Yeah. Rather than just showing clips from the shows and saying Funhouse is on, Fridays at 4:20. So you've got to admire that. It didn't always pay off, didn't always work. But I think it was nice that we and the guys who came up with the ideas tried to push the envelope and do something a bit different and stuff that might, for whatever reason, stick in your memory and remind you to watch the show. It was very competitive. I always remember that. We used to look at the overnight figures, sort of religiously every day. And we felt a real need to, win the ratings war on a daily basis, which I'd say for a large part we did back in those days. But yeah, it's some of the fine messes I found myself in were unusual, to say the least.
And were the promos also filmed at Central? Did you make use of the studios for those?
They were, yeah, and that was another great thing for me. I remember we filmed quite a few of them in the same studio that Tiswas was made in. I can't remember what the number was. Was it 2?
I believe, because I've got friends who are massive nerds of Tiswas, it was Studio 3.
Studio 3, yeah. But I fanned out on that because Tiswas was a massive show for me when I was a kid, and I loved it, and I loved that my parents loved it, and I loved that they loved it, and Tarrant and Sally James and Bob Carolgees and Sylvester McCoy, and all those great people who took part in that, and Benny Henry, and it was a religion for me for a couple of years as a kid, and certainly I think you can see the influence of that in some of my later work. I adored it. So to be in that same studio, and I could see, there were bits of it that, although they were quite run down by this stage, they weren't very busy, and the old central studios were on the verge of being sort of closed down, and the move to Gas Street. I would look at old clips of Tiswas and say, "Oh, blimey, that's the rail, that's the fire escape." And when Tarrant came out of the back door of Central at OB security and was naked and was covering his bits with both hands, and and that, just seeing that door was magic. It was. It meant a lot, and was really exciting to be there, albeit it was, it was not at all in its heyday, and the studios were, on their way out, certainly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of it had moved to Nottingham, of course, at that point.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier, so after 5 years of that, production of CITV moved to Gas Street, a couple of streets down, and you changed roles and you became the producer. So tell me how that change happened, and how you came to pick the likes of Steve Mulhern and Danielle Nicholls to be the hosts of the new InVision relaunch that happened.
Yeah, well, there'd been a change at the top. And a brilliant guy called Nigel Pickard came in to run CITV, and we'd been doing it our way, the Out-of-Vision way, for 5 years, and he was a big believer that it was time to go back in vision, which I think was absolutely the right call. I was a bit long in the tooth for that sort of thing, and it wasn't really for me anyway. I was quite happy to do the voices and some InVision messing about, as various characters and acting, but I never considered myself really to be a presenter. And I was out the door pretty much, I got my coat on, ready to leave. And the guy they brought in to exec it, a chap called Graham Douglas, asked me if I'd like to stay and produce. And I thought about it and said no. And they offered me a little bit more money. So I thought about it again, said yes, and gave it a go. And and that was a big turning point for me. And I think I found really then what I really wanted to do for the rest of my career. And that was produce content as opposed to appear in it. And we needed presenters. I, again, with my background at the Central Junior Television Workshop, was very familiar with auditions and workshopping and improvisation, all of which are very important, of course, to presenters who are doing live shows. So set up a 2-day audition. Well, first of all, we put the call out for tapes, and people sent in thousands of VHS. That's what it was in the day, VHS cassettes. And we put them in and we'd watch them, and pretty much within the first 10 or 15 seconds, you knew whether this person stood a chance or not. And there were some very bizarre tapes that came into us, some of them probably, borderline legal. And Stephen and Danielle were among the very long list, and then we whittled that down, and we called them in for screen tests, and they both did very well. And then we got our last, I think it was 6 people, 3 boys and 3 girls. And in order to ascertain what the best chemistry, what the best combo would be of these 6 people, do the 2-day workshop on Gas Street. on the building, the white building opposite Central Television. I'm not sure if it's still there, just over the bridge. And yeah, we had a great time playing drama games and doing improvisations and all that sort of stuff. And it was very clear to me at the end of that 2 days that Stephen and Danny were the hot ticket. So we took that to the network, who agreed, thankfully, and the rest is history. Mr. Mulhern's been there ever since, and Danny's gone on to do some other great stuff as well. And they remain very, very talented and successful, which is great.
Indeed, it was great. That was really my era of CITV that I remember the most. It was just so good. I loved it. I watched it every single day without fail, pretty much from when that relaunch happened in '98 up until when it left Gas Street, about 2004. And I imagine it was, although probably a very busy job, it was great fun and rewarding for everybody.
It was, and we all got on so well. I mean, we really, we saw each other every day. We socialised with each other, because when you're doing a job like that, it is pretty much all consuming. You haven't got a lot of time outside of it for other relationships. And we're all of a similar sort of age. I was a little bit older, but we would often go for a drink on Broad Street, and yeah, we were great pals as well as colleagues, which made everything a lot easier, and we had a great time. Why wouldn't we? What a fantastically privileged position to be in, for all of us. So yeah, again, days I look back on very, very fondly indeed.
Fabulous stuff. It's quite surreal for me, really, because I was such a huge fan of CITV, and to hear people talking about places that I know so incredibly well. I mean, Broad Street and Gas Street, I know really, really well. I mean, the Broad Street studios have long been demolished, but the Gas Street building still stands. I went past it not too long ago, actually, because I've previously interviewed Danielle and Leah Charles King. I've still got their contact information. I just took a picture of the front and sent it to them and said, remember this place? And they said, oh yes, because it hasn't changed one bit on the outside. In fact, I walked past it and I remember there was a week of programmes, or a week of continuity for Sutty's 50th birthday, and there was a sketch where Sue daydreams about Stephen and they're walking along the bridge, and that little bridge at the side with the little water under it is still there, so it hasn't changed at all. I'm sure you'd be pleased to hear.
Yeah, no, I am actually. It's nice to know it's still there. And I remember that week, the Sutty 50th anniversary week, as the exec producer of Sutty came and spent a few days with us. John, can't remember his surname, but it was a long time ago. Yeah. And we did the song. I remember poor old Mr. Mulhern being so uncomfortable singing that song on the last day, on Friday, when they finally discovered that Sutty and Sweep and the gang had been there all week, because the conceit was that they didn't know. So it was almost a mini drama in amongst the links. But yeah, he did it, bless him, and got away with it, I think.
Because I've always wondered, actually, because the Gas Street building has pretty much always just been for central news. I think, if I'm right in thinking, when it was built, it was intended to be wholly used by ITV, but as things went on, it's just become a news thing, and they rent out most of it now. In the early days of the Envision, it was in that very small studio. Where was that based? Because I know later on you shared space with Central, and that was the bigger blue set. So where was the smaller one originally?
The small one, it was on the first floor, and it was just a little chroma key studio, I think, that News used. It was virtually in the newsroom for Central News West, and there was a tiny little gallery next door. And we were able to, we agreed that we could use it and dress it. And that's where the cutouts of all the characters from the shows, the idea for that, because I was thinking, well, how are we going to make this look like anything other than, obviously the BBC had done the broom cupboard. It was probably the same size as their studio, but we didn't want it to look like the broom cupboard. We didn't want a desk and sort of that sort of setup. So it occurred to me that if we had life-size cutouts of characters from the various shows dotted around, that would be a cheap way of making it look interesting and promoting the shows at the same time, because we were that's what we were all about at CITV, was promoting the shows, pointing to the shows, because we were a commercial channel, and we needed to attract the audiences, and we could find numerous ways, interesting, clever perhaps, but creative ways of doing that, pointing to the shows. But everything we did promoted the show, and I think that's absolutely right. And I think sometimes the BBC meandered off into becoming a little bit sort of, you weren't quite sure what it was about, some of their link time, because they were opposed to the hard sell, but we sort of gleefully took that on, and that helped us, actually. I think it helped us focus and helped us be just as, if not more, creative, because we had a theme for our ideas all the time, whatever show that happened to be.
Yeah, and the one good thing about having the InVision is that pretty much anybody that appeared on a CITV show was invited in for a conversation, and that's the other thing for me. When I walk past the building, I stand there sometimes and think, the amount of people that I loved watching on CITV, the various programmes that I loved, like Zap and Art Attack and Sooty, everybody walked through those gates at some point for a chat, which I thought was cool.
And some big stars, from the wider world of entertainment. I remember Britney Spears came to us before she was famous, or when she was just on the cusp of becoming famous, and she was doing a bit of a whirlwind tour of the UK, and she came and she performed for us, and we even got her to do a line for our promo tape, because the contract to provide the links for the ITV network was coming up, and we got all the celebs who came in to look at the camera and say Central is the home of CITV, which it was, and always had been. Jim Stokoe was the man who created it, really. He was the head of presentation and promotion at Central Television, a great guy. And he pretty much invented the concept of it, really, of links, before the BBC did. Created that as a day part, that had its own bespoke packaging and links and promos for the network, and that was before the BBC. Although most people probably don't realise that. All of that stuff, all of those stars would come, and we'd get them to say Central is the home of CITV for our promo reel to win the contract again for the network, which thankfully we did. There were a lot of all the stars of that era. You would have loved it, Jack.
I would have
had a couple of days in reception. I'm sure you would have you would have absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I think I would have been running around very excited. I'd be the same now if anybody from that era walked past me.
Yeah.
I mean, it was only last week that I went and met up and had dinner with Tim Whitnell, who was Angelo in Mike and Angelo. So that was cool.
Great Tim, yeah, he's a great guy as well, and met him several times. In fact, when was the last time I saw him? I think we were in Teddington making Diddy movies.
Oh yeah,
Dick and Diddy movies, and Bob Golding is an old friend of Tim's, and he came. We all met up one evening after work for a drink, and he was lovely. He was writing the Kenny Everett biopic.
Oh yeah.
For BBC Four, and he remembered me, and actually he wrote some songs for Your Mother Wouldn't Like It.
Okay.
He wrote some of the songs for Your Mother Wouldn't Like It that we sang. So our connection went way back.
Okay, small world, isn't it, with kids TV?
Yeah, isn't it, Josh?
And also, one last thing with the CITV era. Recently, something's resurfaced online called "It Shouldn't Happen to a Children's Presenter," which was the auditions after Stephen and Danielle, when it was Andrew and Tom who was picked, and you feature in it a lot, showing you going through the tapes and picking people. Do you remember that being filmed?
I do. I do remember it very well. I mean, Tom is another fantastic talent that I spotted. He was too young the first time I spoke. He sent his tape in. He was only 14, and he was from Bourneville in Birmingham. Probably still is. And I remember thinking, this guy's got something quite special, actually. And was very keen to get him in. We did get him in, and obviously he got the part. But he's another. I've got a couple of names that I lay some credit to discovering them and their great careers. And Mr. Mulhern is one. Tom Arthurville, as he's now known, is another. And Melvin O'Doom, of course, who were... I'm proud to say that I gave them their first professional gig on TV. But no, Tom and Andrea was excellent as well. Really, really good and approachable and likable, and really stood out from so many of the other auditionees. So I think we had a cracking team of presenters. We really did. And then we brought in Leah, and when those guys came, was my transition out of CITV and over to the Beeb. And so I didn't get to work with them as much, really, but I was there when they came on board. And they were, that documentary shows me talking to one candidate that they featured throughout. I haven't watched it, of course, as you know. I never watch anything that I take part in. And I come across as quite callous, I think, because I tell her not to be upset by not having got the part. But of course, what they didn't show was the hour and a half I spent on the phone talking her down from her disappointment. And I think they cut it down to about 10 seconds of me saying, well, yeah, it's not really that bad. Worse things happen at sea, and all the best for the future, which wasn't quite an accurate. I mean, obviously they couldn't show the whole thing, but it wasn't. It made me look more callous, I think, than I was.
Yes, that's exactly how it plays out.
It did play out. Oh, bloody hell! I mean, the guy. I remember the cameraman, actually, who was, because he was in the office with me at Central, and obviously. She was at home, and he said, "Oh, that was a tough call. I thought you did really well." I said, "Thank you. Yeah, it was a tough call. Because I think the expectation was, certainly from her point of view, and the way it had been set up, that she would get the part. They'd followed her all the way through, and she was very good, and she was a strong contender. But it just so happened that she was picked to the post, and sometimes that does happen." Yeah. For no good reason, for no really, quantifiable reason, it goes the other way. But yeah, I remember a couple of people saying to me for a while afterwards, bloody hell, you were a bit hard on that girl, weren't you?
Yeah, and unfortunately, it popped up on YouTube in recent times, I'm afraid to say.
Oh, did it? Oh, great. I love YouTube.
So let's move on then to when you went to the Beeb. I'm assuming this was around 2001, 2002.
It was, yeah.
And you were responsible for creating one of my favourite Saturday morning kids shows, Dick and Dom in the Bungalow. Tell us about the genesis of that programme.
So I went over to the BBC, where Nigel Pickard, who had been the head of kids at CITV, was now head of BBC Kids. I met a great guy and a mentor of mine, Paul Smith, who was the head of presentation there, and got a job producing presentation for the new channel. CBBC. As it happens, I actually spent most of my time in press doing the BBC One and BBC Two links. I didn't actually produce any of or very little of the new channel stuff, because the new channels were just launching that year. And there I met Richard McCourt and Dominic Wood, who were sort of becoming a double act. They'd done a few things together. They weren't officially known as Dick and Dom just yet, but that was just starting to happen, coinciding with the launch of the channels. And we did our bits, well under the radar for the most part, and some fairly daft stuff, but still, my old ethos from CITV was that everything must be program focused. No matter how daft and bizarre and crazy it is, it must have a point to it ultimately, and that is to promote a show. And we got on like a house on fire, and they loved the stuff I wrote for them, and I loved the stuff that they came up with and did, and we were making each other laugh all the time. And then it was announced that they wanted 2 shows for the weekends, for Saturday and Sunday morning, 3 hours long each, with acquisitions, with cartoons. So effectively extended links, but very extended links. Some of the bits that we did were 10, 15 minutes before we hit a cartoon, probably longer than that actually. And we were given a title. So I put my hand up to do it, and Paul Smith, bless him, gave me that opportunity. And we were given a title, which I believe Nigel Pickard came up with, Dick and Dom in the Bungalow, because people said, okay, so Dick and Dom are going to do this Saturday morning show. What are we going to call it? Dick and Dom in the House? And Nigel said, more like Dick and Dom in the Bungalow. And that stuck. And that was great. And so we were given 8 weeks, 3 hours of airtime on Saturday and 3 hours on Sunday.
Yeah.
A very small budget, and told to come up with something. And yeah, so set about that. And I think the breakthrough came when I decided it should be a game show. I knew I wanted some kids in it, not lots, not like a live and kicking audience, but just a smaller group of kids, a friendship group. And I thought, if we make this a game show throughout the whole 3 hours, it gives, again, a sense of purpose to whatever nonsense we come up with, because whatever it is, we can award or deduct points for taking part in it. And then it sort of, it took shape, really. And I wrote that first program script and said, okay, we'll call them the Bungalow Heads, and we'll get them to do this and that, and this is how we'll introduce it. And we came up with some games, like Bangers and Dash, where 3 of them would dress up as jockeys in the silks and 3 of them would dress up as sausages, and they had to ride their friend across the set. And Fat on Your Back, which is where 2 of them would wear big fat monks costumes and literally just have to stand up, which was a lot harder than it sounded. And all sorts of other games and madness in that first series, which was very rough. If you get a chance, I'm sure it's on YouTube, that first episode. But we were literally no rehearsal at all. I think we'd had an hour before we went live, where we were actually in the studio with a full crew. But in the hands of the brilliantly talented Dick and Dom, you can do that, because they can turn any situation to their advantage and guide it safely home. So although I was in their ear pretty much all the time during the shows, we knew we were in safe hands. And their talkback technique is absolutely second to none. And that is a real skill, to have somebody giving you instructions in your ear while you're talking, as though that's not happening, and you're just feeding that information into your act, into what you're doing, which they can both do seamlesly. And I've always been in awe of that talent, because that alone is, extraordinary. I couldn't do it. I know I couldn't. So that's sorry, I was rambling on. That's how that started. Yeah.
Fabulous. And it went from those small beginnings where it was just on the main channel, eventually moved to BBC One, and became even bigger. I mean, did you think that the show would become the huge success that it did, and the fact that it's so fondly remembered to this day?
It's really odd, because no is the short answer. But we didn't really care about that at the time when it first started. We were just having such a great time, and we felt it was good. We felt it was different and it was good, and we thought if people watching this are having a tenth of the fun that we're having making it, then I think we're onto something here. But it didn't really register with us. The channels had just started and nobody was watching the channels at all. The CBBC channel for sure. CBBC is probably a different matter, but CBBC, nobody was watching it. And we started to register an actual rating on the Barb system during our shows on Saturday and Sunday morning. And the internet had started, which was still very new then, and TV Custard and a couple of the other sort of message boards started to mention us. And I think the first review I remember, somebody in the office read it out, 2 custard-covered thumbs up for Dick and Dom in the Bungalow. And then we realised that people were watching it and enjoying it and were, sort of joining our gang. Because that was the thing about the show, was the more you watched, the more you were rewarded, because there were so many callbacks to things that had happened in previous weeks and previous episodes, and you would see how a game that we tested by necessity live on air would evolve and get better, hopefully get better or slicker, as the weeks went on. In fact, at one point we used to stick a new and improved stamp on the game Sting as it finally sort of came together. But hopefully that journey was fun for the viewer as well. And that was the thing. We always felt we included the viewer in it wasn't all in jokes and us just amusing ourselves. It was all, if you were watching, you were part of it.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. I mean, yeah, it came across that way. It was certainly very chaotic and anarchic. And the one thing I've noticed looking back at it as an adult is how much was squeezed into it that I'm like, the intended target audience of children, would they have got this? Because there was I'm sure I remember a joke. I hope I haven't made this up, but I seem to remember somebody wandering on set dressed as Kate Bush singing Wuthering Heights and then being carted away by men in white coats. And then there was the various celebrities that were in the cage that were like people that had been on television 20 years ago. And then in the final series there was the game shows, most of which hadn't been on TV for a long time. So I mean, why did you decide to do that? Because I'm sure the kids were like, what's this?
Because I wanted to do it because it made me laugh, and I think as I say, the worst thing you can be is self-indulgent in these things. But I think that, for example, the game shows, so Bullseye, which obviously those of a certain age would know. But if you didn't, it didn't really matter because you sort of got it anyway. You could see what the point of it was. You weren't excluded because you'd never watched Bullseye. You could see they were trying to throw stuff at a dartboard and they'd score on that basis, And yes, some of the, the bully references would be that they'd be better if you had seen it, perhaps. But they weren't totally excluding you if you didn't come with that prior knowledge. And it was sort of aimed, although clearly it was a kids' show, but it was looking for that slightly broader adult audience as well. We had a big student following, and it goes back to my love of Tiswas. And I might have been quite odd in this, but I loved as a kid that my parents loved watching Tiswas with me. And it was quality time, for us as a family to watch television. And I loved it because of all the stuff that I got out of it and the maths. It was the same with the goodies as well, actually, I remember as a kid, And I loved watching my mum and dad laugh at Tarrant and Sally James and Sylvester McCoy and Lenny Henry. That made me feel this was, I don't know, it made me feel like this was good stuff, because it's making the grown-ups laugh. It's not, and that meant a lot to me. And that with the Bungalow, that we were able to put some of that stuff in. The odd reference that only the mums and dads would get.
Yes.
But it didn't matter. It didn't get in the way of enjoying it as an 8-year-old. You know, and it's Saturday morning. It's a different time. Adults are around to view. You know, it's not tea time on a Wednesday when there's so much other stuff going on. You know, in the week. And I think we had a bit of a duty to include as many of the families as we could, and those little daft bits. I think they were an important part of its appeal to everybody, to all the age groups.
Indeed. And also, I guess, I mean, I don't know whether this happened in Tiswaz's case, but it certainly happened a lot in the Bungalow's case. It was a show that caused a lot of controversy, got discussed in Parliament. There was newspaper articles about a couple of moments. Were you proud of the controversy that sometimes it caused, or was, as a producer, sort of you just like going, oh God, what have I done? You know, such as the famous one where Dick was pregnant, or when Dom wore that T-shirt that said Morning Wood that got him into a lot of bother and stuff like that. I mean, what was your thoughts on that?
No, I always felt, and you know, you can only do what you think is right, and we never really set out just purely to be controversial. And it was a different time politically as well. You know, it was the country had a different vibe about it. You know, this was Tony Blair. It was New Labour. Things felt more liberal, generally, I think, in the country, and we had very supportive bosses all the way up to the very top. You know, all the way up to Alan Yentop, who appeared in the very last episode of Dick and the Bungalow.
Yes.
And was a great supporter of ours. And we felt really enabled, you know. It wasn't about, oh, should we do, you know. I mean, obviously, you know, we needed reining in at times, and thank goodness we were pulled back when it was looking like it might be inappropriate. But also, you know, my spider sense tingles, and I think I've got a pretty strong sense of what's on the line and what's over it, you know. And sometimes you might debate that call was slightly off, but I think generally speaking, most of it and of its time, you know. It was 16 years ago now. Mm-hmm. That's a long time.
Yes.
And you can't judge everything in the past by today's standards, because the situations were different then. Although, you know, we are more enlightened, you would hope.
Yes.
Now, and there was perhaps certain things that I think were ill-advised, but the majority of it I stand by. Mm-hmm. And think, you know, it's our job to push the envelope and you know, try things and be a bit edgy.
Absolutely.
While still being, you know, responsible.
Absolutely. So it's the 20th anniversary of Dick and Dom in the Bungalow this year, and it's been announced that there's going to be a live tour. Tell us a bit about that and the whole genesis behind the idea.
Well, I think it's something that we've been quite interested in doing for a while. We like the idea of doing a stage version. We did actually do a stage version back in around about 2005. We did a charity show at the Bloomsbury Theatre in London for myeloma cancer research, which was an illness that touched Dom's family. And we were in production, so it was fairly easy to get everybody to sort of muck in, and in about 4 days get a stage show up and running. And it was great fun. The whole cast were involved, and it was seat of the pants stuff. Didn't really have a budget as such, other than in goodwill of those taking part. But it was great. And we got a good review in the Evening Standard, which I thought it was very, very nice of them to review us, considering how ad hoc the whole thing was. But yeah, it seemed to go down very well. And we played just 2 shows. It was a Sunday, I think it was a matinee and an evening performance, and packed houses. And yeah, it was great fun. So I think from that, we always had somewhere in the back of our minds that we'd quite like to do it again. And the 20th anniversary seemed like a good excuse, a good reason to do it. So yeah, here we are. We teamed up with a company called Kilimanjaro, who do lots of these sorts of shows, TV shows on stage.
Fabulous. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. I've got tickets to go to the one in Nottingham.
It's royal, yeah.
Yes. I mean, you're doing all these theatres. I mean, obviously, Dick and Dom in the Bungalow has a reputation for being quite messy. I mean, you probably don't want to give away too much, but have you had to kind of twist some people's arms in allowing a show like that to be done in their nice, clean theatres? Because I imagine you can't do that. You can't do that as a live stage show without there being some form of mess, I suppose.
Well, there will be mess.
Okay.
That's for sure. But we have to be a little bit more contained about it, I suppose. I mean,
Yes.
We can't throw creamy muck all over the nice plush seats of these beautiful grand theatres. So yeah, we're going to do the mess, but we're going to do it in very clever ways, and hopefully we won't be chased out of town by angry theatre managers. So obviously we've got to be mindful of that, but it will be a big part of the show.
Good. And yeah, because I was in a pub the other day and I heard the Ace of Spades, and I said to my friend who's coming with me, I said, if they don't play that at that show, I'm not going to be happy.
Yeah, well, it's funny because we're trying to, because I'm actually writing the script for the show and trying to get as many references in and old familiar themes and catchphrases and sort of running gags that we had at the time, and yeah, it's going well. I think people are going to like it.
Good.
Like it.
Good, yeah, because the Ace of Spades reminds you of 2 things. One of them's the Young Ones, and the other is Dick and Dom in the Bungalow. So yes. I always think of it when I hear that song. Yeah, the only thing that surprised me, although, like you say, there may be more dates next year, is I looked at the list of places that you're doing, and there's one very important place that was missing off that list. Can you guess where?
Is it Wolverhampton by chance?
No. I looked. I was like, "There's no Stoke-on-Trent."
No Stoke-on-Trent. I passed through Stoke-on-Trent again. I went to London to visit a production facility a couple of weeks ago, and we went through Stoke. And yes, that song always leaps to mind when you see the sign at the station there. Yes, no Stoke at the moment, I'm afraid, but that's not to say it might not happen next year.
Good stuff.
So, yeah.
Good stuff. Well, I hope it goes very well. I mean, the response that you've had on social media has been crazy, and I believe quite a lot of the tickets sold out within a day, 2 days, maybe. I mean,
it's selling really well. It is. So I would recommend anybody who does think they might like to come along to book early to avoid disappointment, as they say. A couple of the venues already have sold out, I'm led to believe. So, yes, come and see us. It'll be great. It will be brilliant.
I mean, I know you probably don't want to give away too many spoilers, but will there be a game of Bogies at all, do you think?
Well, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because Bogies, obviously, the real fun of Bogies is to do it when nobody else is aware that you're doing it, and to do it in a place where making a lot of noise isn't really appreciated. I'm sure there will be lots of people having unofficial games of Bogies in the audience at various points. But yes, Bogies will certainly be a part of the lineup.
Are you going to be at every show there to do the commentary?
I don't think so.
It's not the same without you doing the commentary.
Oh, bless you, Jack. No, I'm afraid not. But I think actually there was a game of Bogies at the O2 Arena, an impromptu one that was famously reported back to us that the two halves of the arena started playing bogies against each other during the interval. And yeah, that was quite a thing. So I suspect there might be some of that at our show as well.
More than likely. It'll probably turn into like the Rocky Horror Show where everybody gets involved and throws things around and dresses as various things or something like that anyway. Or maybe like... Because Tiswas did a reunion thing not too long ago on stage as well. I mean, I wasn't there, but I got friends who did, and they said that they threw buckets of water into the audience and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I imagine it might be similar to that.
Well, we are going to include 6 members of the audience will be invited just before the show starts to be the Bungalow heads.
Oh, wow.
So if you have a lucky golden ticket, if you're chosen, you will be a Bungalow head. It is possibly your last chance or if you missed it at the time, and we will have it will be mostly adults, I think, that will be the Bungalow heads. I mean, it is a family show, of course.
Yes, of course.
And we expect lots of kids to come along. So, it's probably going to be a mixture of sort of older kids and adults who will be invited on stage. So there'll be a lot of audience interaction in that way.
Well, I hope it's a success. I'm so happy that it's back. It's definitely a completely different formats, but I think if you did a TV show, how many people could come and sit and watch that? Probably not as many as a live tour. So it's definitely the way to go, really. And as we've said previously, I don't think you get away with half of what you did on the original show now. So, yeah, and you'll probably get quite a few people who probably have had a drink beforehand as well. So that'll be interesting.
Oh, blimey, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Maybe we should ban alcohol from the surrounding area for a few hours before each show. I think it's going to be great fun. And it is a family show, but there'll be lots in it there for those of us who remembered it from 20 years ago.
Yeah. Good stuff. Since the Bungalow, you've stayed with CBBC for years, and you've created and produced a number of shows, such as The Slammer, Hoopla, and more recently a revival of Crackerjack, which I've noticed all have a variety element to them. Have you always been a fan of variety shows and wanted to bring that back to a modern audience?
I remember liking variety shows. I mean, as a kid, when I was a kid, they were all over the place. There were lots of them on TV. Every show had variety acts, it seemed. And then they went out of fashion for a very long time. And in 2006, 2005, 2006, Joe Godwin, who was the head of entertainment for kids at the time, said, I'd really like to bring back a variety show, just some acts that from all around the world that kids wouldn't otherwise get a chance to see. And so looking for a new and interesting and, a follow-up to the Bungalow, I suppose, an interesting, different way of doing that. Looked at, what about if we set it in, we perhaps merge it with a sitcom and do something that leads up to being careful to steer away from the Muppet Show, because that was obviously a version of that, although their acts were puppet sketches effectively, weren't they, and songs. But and then we looked at various options. None of them really appealed, and then hit on the idea of a prison with showbiz criminals, and every week there would be a freedom show, and a number of acts would be chosen. 4 acts would be chosen from the prison population to perform in front of an audience of kids, and whoever got the loudest cheers at the end of that show would be released, their debt to society repaid, and they'd be on their way. Their sentence would be cut short for whatever showbiz crime it was that they committed. And we were very fortunate to find the brilliant, the one and only Ted Robbins to be the governor of that show. And when I met him, he was so full of enthusiasm for the idea. It was impossible not to ask him to do it. And he came up with the catchphrase, "Who's the governor?" "You're the governor." That was his. He said that one of the first things he said to me when we met in person for the first time. And I loved Ted from well, I mean, he'd done lots and lots of stuff, but I particularly remembered him from the League of Gentlemen, playing the guy in Creme Brulee, which was a big favourite of mine. The League of Gentlemen still is a brilliant show, and Inside Number 9. And I was very lucky to get to work with Reece Shearsmith on Diddy TV many years later. So yes, so that's how the Slammer was born. We looked at various places to do it because I wanted it to look quite authentic, you know, the prison side of it, the sitcom side of it, and we even went to the Bad Girls set. I don't know if you remember Bad Girls, which was a drama set in a prison, and that was at Three Mills, and we went and had a look around it, but it was very definitely a drama set. Not a studio entertainment. We couldn't get a studio audience in there. You know, there was performance space as such. So I enlisted Mr. David Bevan, who designed the Slammer, the Bungalow set for us, and also Chute and Crackerjack later on, and asked him to design the Slammer set, which he did fantastically, and that stood us in good stead for six series, I think we did altogether. Slammer and the Slammer Returns.
So yeah, you've worked on a lot of stuff on CBBC over the last many years. I mean, what have you been up to recently, and what's next for you?
Well, interesting times as always. Crackerjack, I suppose, was the most recent show, which was an absolute joy to make. And one of the proudest moments of my career was when we had Stu Francis and Bernie Clifton and Jan Hunt and Don McLean come to the studio to see a show. And, you know, it's quite an audacious thing to bring something like that back, something that was such a massive hit and a household name back in the day. And they told me afterwards, and they genuinely meant it, that they loved it. And that was just fantastic. And that was what I'd really hoped for, you know, as much as anything else. Obviously, that we find a new audience, and it did. But that those forefathers of it, you know, felt that we did it justice. And they were so kind about it, and it was actually I really get emotional, but it was quite emotional when they said how much they enjoyed the show and how much they thought Sam and Mark were fantastic presenters. And of course, they are fantastic presenters for that program. So yeah, Crackerjack is sadly not coming back at the moment, but we felt that we felt very happy with what we did, and it had a good reception. Got 5 stars in The Guardian. That's not easy to come by.
Good stuff.
And also Big Fat Like, which was another series that's not coming back, which was a sketch show with Richard David Kane, Joseph Elliott wrote most of it and created, really. And I'm very, very proud of that show as well. A sketch show shot entirely during COVID, which brought a whole new set of rules to the TV production process, I can tell you. I mean, that's certainly with Crackerjack Series 2, it was a different. We were the first studio show back in the studio at Media City after the first lockdown, or during that first lockdown. And to come out to no studio audience and shout Crackerjack, it's sort of, you lose something, you know. It's you're only able by law really to get up into about 3rd gear, and obviously it hampered a lot of the games and other things that we'd want to do normally, because everybody had to be 2 meters distance from each other. This is when it first started, and everybody was, you know, adhering to all of this very strictly. So those are very recent things. I've actually just made my first preschool show as a producer, Mr. Tumble's Busy Bus Day. And I've always, Justin and I have always got on rather well and said that we must do something together sometime. And that opportunity arose at the start of this year. And we've just done a Mr. Tumble special. And it's called Mr. Tumble's Busy Bus Day. And it's lovely. It's a charming piece. Not my usual programme. not usual sort of stuff, but very lovely to work on, and I think a quality item nonetheless. Thanks to Mr. Fletcher and the other incredibly experienced people who work on those shows. So for the future, at the moment, it's development. Some interesting new talent is appearing, and we're looking at a vehicle for them. I can't say too much. I don't want to spoil the surprise for anybody. But yeah, it's who knows what's coming next. We are at the BBC in-house productions is becoming part of BBC Studios. So it's a whole new playing field for us, and we'll see what happens.
Well, Steve, it's been great chatting to you. Thank you for being such a great guest and sharing your memories, and long may the shows that you make continue, and thank you for the great stuff that you've worked on over the last 20, 30 years. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's been interesting. I was slightly trepidatious about this, but it's actually been a lot of fun. So thank you, Jack.
Thank you. A big thanks to Steve for sharing his memories there. Some great anecdotes. Well, that's it for this episode of the podcast. At the moment, the Jack's Throwback Attack series is going to be taking a bit of a break, but I hope to be back next year. Thank you for your support, and thanks for listening. From me, Jack Hayward, goodbye.